Morning, everybody. Andy here again, day 37. As usual, I should put the figures down below. And the figures are quite a jump yesterday because of the fact that the government are now including all the deaths, the ones that happen in the community as well, care homes, hospices, etc., etc. And there's a bit of a lag and everything. So a fair bit of a jump. So yesterday the daily death figure was 765, which brings the total up now, quite a jump, to 26,097. So we're well over that 20,000 figure. And I do believe now that we reckon that we're the sort of second highest total in Europe after Italy, which is quite worrying. And obviously we're still going up. I know Italy have still got cases, but predominantly as a more, if that makes sense. And there's a lot of discussion going on, but I shall mention that in a minute. The album yesterday, 1971, Electric Warrior by T.Rex. I remember that. What a great album. And one of the first albums that I ever bought, actually. The first single I ever bought was actually back on my 13th birthday, and I remember that actually, was Hot Love by T.Rex, which actually now isn't one of my favourite Hot Love T.Rex songs. I think it goes on too long, but who am I to argue? But that's a great album, a great band, and so, one of those, the first band I ever really got into, actually, sort of, what was that, that's 1971, as I said. The book, I finished the book, Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. Thank you very much, Thomas Logan, who suggested I read that book. Probably wasn't the sort of book I would normally read, which is why recommendations are so good, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I won't go into the plot, but I've been dreaming about quests and chases and things like that for anyone who's read it. And there's the film, Steven Spielberg film, which I might have to check out now to see. Well, what I liked about it, it's a science fiction set in the future, so I'm not going to go into the plot, but the thing that kept me in some ways and probably kept me going, although it's well written, it's a good story, was the fact that it's so much going back to the 80s. The creator of this game, or this big system, was obsessed by the 80s, was alive during the 80s, as was I. And so they're talking about things like, there was an incident yesterday where a guy gets into this sort of spacecraft and grabs hold of an 8-track cartridge, because that's the way that they did these things in the 80s, and put it in and started playing randomly, and it was AC/DC's Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, which I happen to have over there, and several of their other albums as well. And also there was a section towards the end of the book where they had to more or less recite all the words and the script dialogue, if you want to call it that, from Monty Python's Holy Grail film, which obviously is a classic, the knights who say knee and all that sort of stuff. So it appealed to me in that respect. So that's one reason why I enjoyed it so much. So thank you, Thomas. Thank you for that. And I'm now going to go back to the Michael Palin book, I think, for a moment. But what I want to talk about today is lockdowns, because I understand that Boris is going to make, because he's back and he's now a father, congratulations, he's now back in charge of the government, and he's going to be making a statement, some sort of idea of as how we're going to come out of this in stages, because other countries are starting to do that. I read something yesterday about the Spanish government have started even putting some sort of tentative dates as to when things can happen. But ironically, the first date they've got, which I do believe was probably in about a week's time, where people will be allowed to go out and exercise. Well, we've been doing that all the time anyway. So they're still catching up with us in a way. And don't forget, they're a couple of weeks or so ahead of us in the curve, if you want to put it that. So we had to add that on. But interesting the way that they're graduating this. And obviously each step depends on the other step being adhered to and working well without any big spikes. And I think that's part of the problem with us, because other countries, as I said, are starting to tentatively think about this and mention dates and things like that. And I saw something about an airline talking about starting to open up flights and things like that. I mean, that ironically in the Spanish statements yesterday, there's no mention of air travel, and they're not talking about tourism at all yet. That is way in the future. They're just talking about the people locally within the country of Spain and the islands, Balearic Islands, the Canary Islands as well. And as I've mentioned so many times, and keep banging home, we go on here about the lockdown. They've had it far, far worse. As I said, they're still catching up with us, and they're not allowed to exercise or anything. So, but I've seen a shift here, and I've noticed other people here as well have noticed a shift. I've seen people talking about it on Facebook, and I've noticed it myself, that it's busier. People aren't adhering to the lockdown in the way that they did at the start. Whether it's because other countries are starting to come out of this, whether it's because our country or our government are starting to tentatively talk about potential easings of lockdowns, that people are starting to think, oh, well, it's all right now, or they're just getting bored with it. Because I've read this several times that sources that know, if you know what I mean, have said that one of the things the government, when they first brought this lockdown in, they were concerned that the people just wouldn't do it. They just would not obey it, which is probably the reason we've never had the strict lockdown that they've had in other countries in Europe, especially France, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and others as well. And I've mentioned that before, and the fact that I thought that they wouldn't do it because they wouldn't be able to police it properly, and they're having enough trouble policing the lockdown that we have now, obviously, because the roads are far busier. There was a report yesterday, I think it was Monday of this week, was the busiest day on the roads since our lockdown started. That tells you something. I've seen things about shops opening up, well, businesses opening more than what they were before. And I'm thinking, well, nothing's changed, so why are these places opening? People are talking about people being out more, family groups being out, going to supermarkets and things like that. That should not be happening. And because of that, rolls on, and because you start to think, well, hang on a minute, why should I be doing this if other people aren't doing this? Because I'm having to sit at home within my four walls. Some people are basically confined for 12 weeks, the elderly and people with serious health conditions. And even they must be thinking, well, why am I doing this? Why am I sacrificing my life as it is? I can't go out and do all the things that I want to do when other people are disregarding this. So, we get into that sort of weird sort of point. And then you start getting that tension between different people. People start reporting people, sort of almost vigilante stuff. People have been shaming people for doing things that maybe they felt they shouldn't do. It's very hard because, as I said before, ultimately when it comes down to it, we're all going to have to look ourselves in the eye and say, I did what I felt was right. I did the right thing. I didn't, break the rules and make things potentially worse by getting involved in an accident and having to go to a hospital and clogging up the NHS and all that stuff, or potentially infecting somebody, because you don't know. That's the whole thing about this virus, is you don't know you've got it until it's too late, in a way, because you will have passed it on to so many people. That's the reason we're having a lockdown or a semi-lockdown. I must admit, I do believe now that we should have just done it the proper way. And just got it over with. And because we've allowed too many people to move around, and of course, because of what I've just said, if they do start to ease it, wallop, there's going to be a huge influx. Of just seeing something that the tube network in London are worried that as soon as any sort of announcement is made, it's going to get a big influx of people, and then we're just going to go back to where we started. I sincerely hope we don't, but I think we need some clear guidance from the government for once, maybe, and do this properly. Otherwise, we're going to end up in the worst situation we are. We're already the second highest total in Europe. I don't particularly want to become the highest total in Europe, because that will affect so many people, and so many other people will needlessly lose their lives, and that's the last thing we want. So anyway, see what the topic is tomorrow. So stay safe, stay at home, and stay strong. I'll speak to you tomorrow, hopefully. Goodbye.